So a little bit about me. I am the marketing brand manager at Anytime Collect. We are an automated accounts receivable software. And we also have done a lot of research in the field of accounts receivable, and we do this coffee break webinar once a month to just quickly give you guys an overview on some really helpful accounts receivable tips. So our agenda for the day, we will first discuss the link between psychology and accounts receivable. So you may have taken a psychology course that was required, back in college or in school, and thought, what am I ever going to do with this again? But there's actually a lot of psychology that goes into how you can be collecting from customers more quickly. We'll also go over some common excuses for customers not paying and give you some tips for how to deal with those common excuses. And some of them you can put in place without using the psychology theory. But when those tips don't work, then we're going to go into that psychology theory and talk about a couple of them and how to understand them, and then how you can put that theory into action. All right, so the benefits to understanding the link. There's a few benefits to this. So the first is recognizing the signs. By understanding the basics of psychology, you can get a better grasp on some of the typical behaviors of someone that's not going to pay. So these are typical signs that you can pick out and understand how you can be a little bit more proactive on recognizing these signs and doing something about it before it becomes a problem. For example, if a customer is beginning to avoid your phone calls or is taking a really long time to respond to emails, maybe that wasn't their MO before, then that may be hinting towards the fact that they're not going to pay their bills. Once these common behaviors are recognized, you can figure out how to make the extra effort to reach out to the customer and get the issue resolved. The other benefit is learning to speak their language. So you might have recognized some of these signs, and now you need to reach out to that customer. A lot of the times we can sometimes get frustrated or angry, and then that turns into lashing out at the customer, but that's really not the best way to make sure that you get paid on time. So by understanding the psychology of accounts receivable, you can also understand the best way to speak with the customer to make sure that you're going to end up collecting payment from them and not alienating them. And then finally, getting the customer to actually make payment and take action on the things that you're doing with them to get them to pay. So psychology can help us to do the right thing to get the customer to pay up. This can be anything from using an incentive program or even threatening to take something away from them because you're understanding how they think and the best route to take to get them to pay. All right, so some of these common excuses for non-payment. I'm sure a lot of you have seen with some of these before in your daily work. So right now we're showing they never received the invoice. This is one of the most common excuses. The best way to deal with something like this is by calling the customer directly and staying on the phone with them and telling them, go to your inbox. This is where it would have come from. Make sure that it's not in your spam. And then with a customer saying that they cannot pay without a purchase order number, for a lot of customers, this is true. They can't make a payment. Their AP department won't allow payment unless they have the purchase order number. But both of these excuses can be dealt with in a number of ways, and one of the easiest is to automate your invoice presentment. So with no purchase orders left off the invoices because it's done automatically, and your invoices being sent automatically to the customer, they can be identified and received as quickly as possible by these customers. The next, if the product was faulty. So the customer might say that the product they got wasn't what they were expecting, or it's not working the way they were expecting it to be. And this could be true, but it could also be a tactic that they're using to get out of paying. One way to combat this is to keep track of any invoice disputes and assign reason codes to them. This way you can keep track of whether this is a higher than normal faulty product issue. In that case, then you would want to go to people outside of the AR department and have a discussion about why this is occurring more often. But you might also notice that this is occurring with one customer over and over again. And at that point, you have to take a step back and decide if that customer is just using this as their payment excuse. Another common excuse is that the due date hasn't arrived. So take a look at your invoices. Some customers might be misinterpreting when the net days begins. And then they're not paying on time, but they don't really think that's their fault. They misinterpreted what the invoice said. So by making sure that your due dates are large and clear on your invoice, for example, stating the exact date it is due rather than the number of days they have to pay can help to reduce the number of this excuse that you're seeing. So you've messed up. This is another common payment excuse. They're basically saying that, you know, you didn't put the right amount on the invoice, or your company messed up on where it was sent, or whatever that might be. This is a more difficult one to deal with. If you're it can be a little frustrating. So make sure you're getting every detail in writing from when they're using this excuse. This way you can prove that you sent things where it needed to be, or that the number on the invoice that was due is correct. Another common excuse we see is the check person isn't here. So this is usually used as a diversionary tactic. Although there are some companies where they require 2 signatures on their checks, and if the person really isn't there, they may not have the ability to send it out. If you're continually hearing this same excuse from the same company, it may be time to ask to talk to somebody else in their accounting department. Cash flow problems. This is a pretty honest excuse, and it's usually not used unless it's actually true. But if they're a brand new customer and they're already saying that they have cash flow issues, you may need to rethink the relationship with that customer. But if they're a loyal, long-time customer, you may need to, you know, give them some leeway. This is something that you have to use with your own judgment when this is given as an excuse. And then finally, our last excuse is, why should we put you ahead of our larger vendors? A report done by Dun & Bradstreet pointed out that the larger the company is, they usually are the ones that are handing out these excuses to small businesses. So if you're a small business and you hear that one a lot, then it's time for you to really take action on this one and call them out on their payment excuses. And then some of the psychology theories you can, you know, put towards combating this type of excuse. All right, so we'll get into those psychology theories now. A lot of these are really interesting. So the first one is the goal gradient theory. So this theory suggests that people become more motivated to reach a goal when they feel they're closer to reaching that end goal. So one of the more common examples of this theory in action that we probably have all seen is the complimentary punch cards that you receive if you go to a local coffee shop or places like that. So the studies by the Scientific American showed that customers using a loyalty punch card were more likely to buy more coffee when they were getting closer to reaching their free cup. So even if they didn't, you know, need or want another cup of coffee, they were going to go again and get that one because they knew that they were closer to getting that free coffee. So this can be translated to accounts receivable by creating more incentives for customers for paying on time. So whether you maybe put in some type of incentive program that gets them, you know, a 2% discount because they're paying their invoices on time, by using that sort of incentive, you might be able to get some of your customers that are typically using excuses to get them to pay on time every single month. The next one is the recency effect. So this one says that, and this is more understandable than most, is that people are able to recall most easily those things that were presented to them last. So to get customers to pay on time by using this recency effect is to make sure that you're keeping yourselves at the forefront of their mind. So whether that's making sure that you're sending out your emails as often as possible with payment reminders, making phone calls to them. This is really one that last common excuse that we got where the vendors were saying, well, why should we pay you first? If you're keeping yourself at the very front of their minds by keeping yourself right in front of them, making phone calls, kind of, even getting on their nerves a little bit, you're going to make sure that you will be that first person to get paid because they're going to remember you and you're not going to just get lost in the hustle and bustle. Our next theory is the fundamental attribution error. So this one says that, and it really has to do more with ourselves than our customers, is that we assume someone is at fault due to issues with their own internal personality as opposed to an external factor that they had no control of. So an example of this is a customer pays late. We might assume that they did this because they're lazy or they're doing it out of spite, when in fact they may have been unable to make the payment because the invoice wasn't approved by management. And this is true even for, we might get a lot of excuses lately, and then we get another customer with another excuse. And this could be maybe that faulty product excuse, or that the invoice didn't have the correct total amount due on it. And we've just been hearing so many excuses, we just assume that customer is being lazy, when in reality, maybe it was something that was our fault that we could have done to make sure that customer paid on time. At that point, we can use the psychology theory to take a step back and look at those invoices again and look at our process as accounts receivable professionals and decide what to do with that customer. The next theory is the prospect theory. The prospect theory is a behavioral economic theory. The idea is that people view losses and gains differently, holding losses with more value. So this theory that we found from the Scientific American again is that people are more likely to pay off small debts than large debts, no matter what interest will occur on either accounts. And this is true in both business and personal. You might look at even in your personal bank account and your personal bills that are due and think, oh, I can, easily pay off this small debt right now, as opposed to trying to get those larger debts down because the smaller debts will go away faster. So we can look at this one as accounts receivable professionals, that you should start focusing on collecting your larger debts first because they're the most likely to go unpaid. So instead of looking at those smaller debts and putting your accounts receivable in buckets and going after those smaller accounts, we should probably start looking at those larger debts and try and collect on those ones first. So how can we put this theory into action? There's a couple ways, and all of them really have to do with being proactive. The first one is creating relationships. So we did talk about a little bit about calling your customers and getting in front of them, and this includes creating relationships. So pick up the phone and talk to your customers. Send welcome letters and get in touch with them outside of emails, just asking them to get paid. The more that you create a relationship with your customers, the more that they'll feel bad about refusing to take your calls because they know you. They aren't going to be trying to avoid you quite as easily if they remember your name and they know your voice and you made an attempt to create a relationship with them. Understand who your customer is. So once you've created that relationship with your customer, you're going to get a feel for who they are and what motivates them. So you might have a customer that has a big ego, and you will find out that you're going to be a little bit more successful collecting payment for them if you play towards that big ego. Or you might have a customer that tends to be flighty and unorganized and that they need a little bit more of a hand holding. So then you can, if you're using any type of automation tool for that for your accounts receivable, you can use that tool to make sure that they're getting really often hit with payment reminders. And you'll find that those customers then start paying on time more often. Extending empathy. So this one can be a little bit more difficult, but if you're able to empathize with a customer when they're struggling, they are more likely to pay you than if you're clearly frustrated and angry. People want to know that you care about, them and their issues. So if you're a little bit more understanding with them and you understand where they're coming from, and then you introduce a new date for payment, you'll be surprised how willing they are to do that and stick with that date. And then explain the benefits of paying. The National Association of Credit Management business credit article that recently came out about psychology explained that people are more shaken by the loss of a benefit than they are excited for attaining a new benefit. So, for example, your customers will likely be more upset if a benefit, such as a 2% credit for paying early, those incentives that we talked about earlier, are taken away from them than by gaining this achievement. So, explain to the customer if they aren't paying on time that they will lose this 2% discount that you guys are offering. And then you might notice that those payments will come in more quickly. And then finally, consider using an automation tool. A lot of the tricks that we gave out today for dealing with those common excuses before having to bring in those psychology tactics can be done by using an automation tool that can send out those payment reminders every single month so that you're constantly touching those customers. Your customers are constantly seeing you and you're at the forefront of their mind, as well as paying attention to invoice disputes. So they can, the automation tool will automatically track all of those invoice disputes with reason codes so that you can tell if a customer is continually bringing up the same excuses over and over again. And it can also track your customers' credit scores. So you can tell, this customer is starting to slip a bit and maybe I need to pay a little bit more attention to them so that they don't end up going bankrupt and we lose all our money. So those are just, a few things that automation can help you with when it comes to dealing with common payment excuses. So that is all that I had today on our psychology tactics. I'm going to send out a poll right now while we wait also for any questions to come in. So make sure you answer this poll and feel free to throw out any questions that you might have about these psychology tactics and common excuses for payments. And do remember that we have these coffee break webinars every single month. So if you go out onto our website and you go to the events panel, I have our website on this next page here. If you go out to our events page on our website, you'll be able to find the sign up for our coffee break webinar, and you can find the topic for next month, and they're always 20 minutes long. So we did get a question, how do you handle delaying tactics which are commonly cultural? So this is a little bit different because you do have to deal with that cultural aspect. I would say that this would take a little bit more research, to look up like why the culture has those delay tactics and how you can do it without, while still being sensitive to the fact that it is something that is cultural and that it may be a little bit unfamiliar to you. There was actually a really good article that was put out by the National Association for Credit Management, and I read it, I want to say a couple months ago, and it was all about dealing with customers that are from a different country or dealing with customers that are in a different country and how you can be culturally sensitive while also collecting. So I would definitely suggest that you go out and find that article. It would be really helpful. Another question we have, would you have an email template for these evasive clients in case they do not return your calls nor email? something before sending them to a collection agency. So out on our website, we do have, and I can actually pull it up for you here so you can see it. Let me get it up and I'll share my screen. We have a ton of collection email templates out on our website. Here we go. So if you come out to our website, anytimecollect.com/white-papers. Hope you guys can see this. Yeah. So if you come out to our website and you go to this page, we have a ton of collection letter templates, and these are all free for you guys to use. And it goes from the first collection letter till the last collection letter and final notice of legal action. And you can take all of those, just copy and paste them, and put the information in it that you need. We have this how to develop killer AR collection letters, call scripts, and email templates. Again, super helpful, and you can just copy and paste everything. So definitely take advantage of this page on our website and take anything that you need from here. Do we have any other questions? Malin, I see that you have your hand raised. Did you have a question? All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, feel free to email me if you need to. If you have any questions that you think about that you have thought about, my email address should be up on the screen now. And definitely check out our website and make sure to sign up for next month's webinar. Have a great day, everybody.